of Torino.
Grazie.
The language I wanted to talk about is the language of music, which to me is, hang on, let me do this. It's very an autonomous language, and I can express things that all of you try to express, but can't quite do elegantly in word and pictures. The other part is, what I do with the music is something very simple. I try to make it a door into the story, because I can't really talk about the meaning of story anymore since Marie has done it brilliantly, but there's something still that needs to happen for an audience to have an experience beyond just seeing the elegance of the images and hearing the beauty of the words. And that is what music does. It opens doors and it lets you in and it gives you the possibility of having an experience, of feeling emotion. And what I try to do, what I always try to do, is I don't try to tell you what to feel. I don't try to tell you to feel in love or to feel sad or any of these things. We can really get it wrong, and we can do the wrong, we can tell the story in the wrong way. But when we get it right, we can add a layer of emotionality, a layer of that secret language into it, that, you know, in the old days they used to say the music is supposed to serve the film. And I just literally yesterday I was in Vienna on a symposium about Max Steiner and Erich Korngold, the guys who really invented film music. And one thing I suddenly realized was they didn't really invent film music, and they didn't see it as film music. There is music, and in the great words of Duke Ellington, there are two types of music. You have good music and you have bad music, and that's it, you know? And what they tried to do is they just tried to write their music, and they didn't think of it as film music or background music or any of those things. It was just music. And they wanted to tell a story, and I want to tell a story every time when with a piece of music. And should I tell you? Well, yes, okay. I made up my mind to be really honest this morning, so whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth, and I just have to look at you and go, let's just pretend we're having, you know, a dinner conversation, and whatever happens, happens, right? And, you know, so one of the things is, I keep thinking that you, the great filmmakers, the great storytellers, complete my music. You know, I write this music and then Marie gives a $100 million budget to put some nice images on top, you know, and it completes it, right? And thank you, Marie. But if we're lucky, and so now I am going to go into some of the things you said, and I'm just going to say it from my perspective. What we do, what we storytellers do, is we are telling the story of humanity. We are telling who we are, who we were, and who we want to be, and what we want to be. And these are crazy times we live in. These are the politics of the world. The world itself is like insane, and I work in all these different, you know, I work in all these different genres. You know, work with David Attenborough about the concerns of this planet. You know, I work with Mireille on SpongeBob, and weirdly, there's a crossover. There's a constant concern of how are we going to survive. You know, I've worked on a lot of science fiction films, and I always think there's something very interesting about science fiction, because name one science fiction film that doesn't somehow drip in nostalgia. There's always something in it that touches us deeply because it seems to echo something from our past. And I keep thinking it is so important to look towards our future. Equally, you guys, there are a lot of technologists in this audience, and what is so easily forgotten, that music is really a product of technology. You know, if you look at a violin, it is a piece of technology of its century. When I was doing Interstellar with Chris Nolan, we were using the big church organ, which was really a piece of technology, just bear with me on this one, because I'm a geek and I love geeking out on this one. It was a piece of technology that was mastered by the 17th century, and it was the most complex piece of technology mankind was making at that point. And it didn't actually, and it stayed being the most complex piece of technology until the telephone exchange was invented in the 20th century. But what I loved was, it was a piece of technology that was at the service of art, at the service of expressing ourselves, at the service of making music. And I am obviously a child of the 20th century, so in the early 70s, I found that thing called a computer. I had access to a computer. And in those days it was for spreadsheets and word processors and all sorts of things. And I thought you could sort of pervert that thing and make it into a musical instrument. And in those days, I mean, synthesizers and computers, etc., and the world of the orchestra were completely and utterly divided. And which seemed ludicrous to me, because up until the beginning of the 20th century, every time somebody invented a new instrument, we just saw it as a new color to add to the music. And so now suddenly, in the latter half of the 20th century, we had this huge divide between technology and the arts. And it wasn't really until animation started to embrace digital technology that I really felt that we were coming back together, and that technology, rather than just being there to do accountancy and build weapons of mass destruction, was suddenly came back into the service of artists. And so because art is vital for me. Art connects, art breaks down walls, art builds bridges, art lets us speak at events like this in one language with words, but you know what the subtext of the word is, because the word is, how can we all get together and somehow make a better story, tell a better story, show us that we are better than they think we are, and be artists and be creative and cantankerous and revolutionary and opinionated and try something new and try something dangerous, and then find people like Mireille who will support us in this. I mean, I don't think I have. Sorry, you're going to be it for my whole talk, all right? I gotta have a victim. You know, I have to have somebody I speak to. I don't know how many movies we made. Actually, hang on. I'm going to tell you one story just to show what a French is. We were working on a DreamWorks movie called El Dorado. And of course I hadn't read the script. I was reading the script on the way to the meeting, and with Jeffrey Katzenberg and Mireille and everybody else. And I'd only got about a third of the way through, and I knew it was two guys on a horse, etc. And I'm pitching my great idea how at the end, when they ride off into the sunset, and I see Mireille's arm going up, and I think, oh, she wants to add something to my, you know, blah blah blah. And Jeffrey isn't even looking at her. He just sort of lowers her arm like this, and I'm thinking, oh, he's so respectful of my idea, this is really great. And I get to the end of it, and he goes, you didn't read the script. And I'm going, of course I read the script. And he goes, no, you didn't read the script, because my whole idea was, as the two of them ride off into the sunset, the music is going, and he said, you didn't read the script, one of them dies. And Mireille wanted to save me from embarrassment, of course. But partly that is the producer's role, to save us, but sometimes it's the producer's role, and I think every project we have worked on, and we've worked on many, many, many projects, it always started off the same way. I get a phone call, and somebody says to me, Mireille says to me in this case, I want to tell you a story. And it takes me back to my childhood, and it takes me back to the thing I love the most in life, somebody telling somebody else a story. And as she's telling me the story, I start getting ideas, I start hearing things, I start going, we gotta go to Africa for this one. We gotta go Madagascar. I was ready to go to Madagascar until security told us that we were probably all going to die, and it wasn't such a good idea. But I was ready to do all these things because, and one of the great things about working within a team and having a strong producer on board is that you are allowed to voice your most ridiculous and crazy ideas, and they are there to embrace it and make it possible. And it is this collegial way of working that I so love. I love working with musicians. I come from a band, so I'm very used to this, you know, let's all work on the story. And then at the end of the day, the thing I learned is, how do you make a good story? Because that's what everybody seems to ask. You know, that's what was asked of Mireille, and I do actually have a slightly different answer for Mireille. I have this relationship that goes back 100 years with Penny Marshall, and we're both insomniacs, so she phones me at 3 o'clock in the morning and we have these endless conversations, which I always use to do things, to get knowledge from. And I remember after she did Awakening saying to her, how do you do a good movie? How do you make a good movie? And she goes, it's easy. It's easy. All you have to do is support your main character. And I thought she meant, you know, like decent food and good hotel rooms and stuff like that. She said, no, just as long as you know your main character, don't let him say anything stupid that's out of character. Don't let him wear a suit that doesn't work within the story. Because if you know what the journey of your main character is, everything else will fall into place. And that absolutely made sense to me. So when I work, I usually don't work from a script, because Mireille was sort of hinting at the state of affairs when we do animation. I mean, I remember on Lion King, it was just a room full of storyboards, and Rob Minkoff and Roger Allers would take me through, and they'd try to sort of tell me the story, and they'd get sort of like 3/4 of the way through, and they'd get to a drawing, and they start arguing amongst themselves. We never got to the end of it, you know. They would come up with new ideas. Animation is always a work in progress, and I think that's a great thing, because it lets us investigate to the very end. Are we truly telling the story we want to tell? Are we staying true to the character? Are we staying true to the story? And that comes back now to this thing that I try to do, which is, it started really very early in my career when I was in a band, and I'd play every working men's club in England. During the 80s was the time of Margaret Thatcher, and things were going to shit, and you know, Sunderland, the shipyards were closing, the coal mines were closing, and we'd play these terrible towns, we'd play these terrible working men's clubs, and you'd see people there, and I would look at them, I would remember them, and I sort of made it my mission, you know, and I made a fictitious character in my mind. Put the hours in. Don't go home early if you have another idea. You know, I mean, God, my social life is impossible, you know, because at 10 to 7, I'll have an idea just before dinner, and then next time I look at my watch, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still doing things. And I'm surrounded by actors, directors, and producers who understand that to do art takes time, to think it through takes time, but then music is real time, and suddenly somebody picks up their instrument and they start playing, and they knock your socks off with their passion and their eloquence and the beauty of their playing. And that's my life, and I want to share my life with you, because I want to add whatever I can, whatever little I can do, I want to do to make the this world a slightly more colorful and a noisy place. Thank you very much. It was towards the end of making Lion King and going to Africa. We're going to go to South Africa to record the choirs. And it was 2 weeks before the general election there where the ANC finally got in. But those 2 weeks were civil war, and it was bloody and it was awful. And I already I'd worked on 3 anti-apartheid movies at that point, so I had a police record in South Africa. And we had this very serious meeting at Disney. Quite a few executives, everybody was sitting around, and they were asking me who was going to finish the score when I got killed or arrested in South Africa. And I was saying, oh, Michael Kamen, he's really good. Oh, no, this guy's really good. And then, because you get so passionate about these projects that it was far more important for me. I didn't care if I was going to get shot or whatever happened. I needed to go and finish this project. And finally, Chris Montan, who was the head of music at Disney at the time, said, you guys are all crazy. Hans isn't going. Lego and my orchestrator and conductor, Nick Lenny Smith, are going to go. And I was just, I was appalled by the idea of not going. I didn't go. I didn't get to go. They wouldn't let me go. I think I wouldn't have gotten into the country anyway. But I was constantly on the phone. I was constantly getting reports, etc. And this is what was going on in Africa while I was not there. The choir would come to the studio every morning. They would start at about 10 o'clock at night. They were supposed to finish at 7. And 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10, 11, midnight, everybody was still there. Everybody was singing. Because in the studio with the music was sanity, and outside was bloodshed and carnage. And there was a spirit of, beauty that was coming out of these voices. And if you ever see Lion King again, just listen to the choir, because these were people that were, life was impossible, but somehow music made it possible, just for those 2 weeks, and then, afterwards, after the 2 weeks, the ANC won, and actually, to just follow up or end the true answer to this question, I'm working on the new Lion King, the live action Lion King. And I'm going to, now, this time, nobody's stopping me from going back to Africa. And it's been so long that I've asked all the children of the people who were in the original choir to be in the choir now, because I think it's important that somehow we carry on the generational tradition of celebrating this incredible victory that happened, of those people getting their country back. So I'll ask you something difficult.
Yes.
Anything.
There?
Oh, that looks dangerous.
Oh, yes. Thank you to be there. I've got a question. I'm working in the VFX industry since around 20 years now, and I personally see director during markup of the music at the beginning, early stage, like previews and things like this, using music like from other show, other movie, and the thing is, at the end, the music is done using like this kind of idea, meaning that there is not a lot of room for creativity for the music part. And I was wondering, what is your point of view about that? Because I find that there is not a lot of place for creativity for the music.
I hope, let me paraphrase your question,
yes.
Because I'm not sure if I understood correctly. You're saying if you come onto the movie and there's 10 music there already, you have no creativity, right? I totally agree with you. That's why I like starting before they start shooting. The way I usually work is Like, you know, for instance, I'm going to tell the story and then you guys can just tell me I've heard this story and I'll go somewhere else. But for instance, if you take Interstellar, I remember running into Chris Nolan somewhere and he said to me, if he were to write me a letter, but he wouldn't tell me what the movie is about, but in that letter would be something, a fragment of something, would I give him one day, and whatever would come to me, I would write. And yeah, it seemed like a good idea, so this letter arrived. There was beautiful thick paper, and it was typewritten, none of that computer nonsense, right? So it was thick paper, so I knew there was no copy. And I will never tell anybody really what was in the letter, but sort of the gist of the letter was, it was really what did it feel like to be a father, and what did it mean to be a father to a child. And I sat down and I wrote this very fragile, tiny little piece, which was really about my son Jake, and finished about 10 o'clock at night, phoned Chris's house, his wife answered, and I said, hey, listen, I finished it, do you want me to send it over? And she said, well, he's curiously antsy, can he come down and hear it? So I said, yeah, sure. So he came over, and here's the thing you need to know. I don't mind speaking to you up here, but if I play a piece of music, I can't look, it's the most personal thing I do the first time I play a piece of music, so I can't look at the person when I play them the piece of music. So I just played the piece of music, didn't look at Chris, finished, turned around and said, well, what do you think? And he paused for a second, he went, suppose I better make the movie. And I went, what is the movie? And he started to talk about space, and he started about this epic canvas and this, all this stuff, and and I got really into the conversation. We're talking, and suddenly I went, stop, Chris, hang on a second. What I've given you is this terribly fragile, tiny, incredibly personal love letter to my son. And he goes, yeah, but that's now I know where the heart of the story is. And we've always worked like this. We always worked, and that's partly why I love animation, because animation is sort of never finished. There's always something we can go and do, and you're involved as a composer in animation from the first day, and so you're part of the storytelling, so you have all the freedom in the world. I mean, if you look at a movie like Boss Baby, or not, as the case may be, but I would like you to look at a movie like Boss Baby because it's a bloody great movie. The range of music goes from Fred Astaire to classical to like church organ with baritone sax, funk music, you name it. I mean, it's just like most crazy palette of music. So the amount of freedom I had in that was tremendous. I mean, you look at, and at the same time, all this stuff becomes incredibly personal, because the only place I know where to write from is myself, my own experiences. Yes, the cliche, I write from the heart, is appropriate. Lion King, I did Lion King. I didn't want to do Lion King. I kept saying to Disney, I'm the wrong guy. I don't like musicals. I don't like fairy tale princesses. And they said, exactly, that's why you should do it. And so the first thing I did was, I thought, how can you tell the audience? And I think this is sort of maybe something I learned, and that might come in useful to some of you guys. The opening to a film is really important, because what you do with the opening is the very first, that's why I love logos, I'm going to, except I hate logo music, because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make a noise. And the opening to Lion King is that voice, that African voice, and this is not your typical Disney fairy tale princess story. Or Gladiator, Gladiator, I mean, any producer will tell you that a movie that opens titled Gladiator and then 1 minute just seeing a hand on wheat in Tuscany, I just thought I mentioned Tuscany since we're in Italy, it allowed Ridley to carry on. You see, I know a lot about my directors. I know that ultimately Ridley is a poet, is a great artist, and somehow the opening of the film has to let the audience know that it's going to be different and sort of invite you on this journey and say, you know, it might be not quite what you expected. You might have thought it was going to be gladiator straight into the battle, which is how the script was, but it's not that. It's going to be gladiator into this poetic moment. And so just bear with us, because it's going to be interesting. And I'm setting the tone for everything else that is going to follow. And part of my job is to create freedom for the director to express himself. It's not just about me expressing myself, it is about them expressing themselves. And me enabling them. I am what would you say? Did you agree? I'm a great enabler of directors, right? And I'm proud of it. I mean, look, Gore Verbinski, Pirates, Rango, you know, I mean, those are crazy. Batman Begins. Do you have any idea how hard it is to do an origin story about Batman? Because the whole point of an origin story is the character doesn't show up until Real 4, so you have to let the audience know, you know, for the first 40 minutes or so that they're not in the wrong movie. No, he's gonna come. Just be patient, you know. So that's part of the delicious problems I get to solve. And by the way, to just finish off this Lion King thing. So I said yes because I had a 6-year-old daughter, and I'm a dad, and I wanted to show off, and I couldn't really take her to any premieres of a Ridley Scott Bloodfest. So I thought, I'll do the Fuzzy Animal movie. And then the Fuzzy Animal movie absolutely threw me, because the Fuzzy Animal movie was about the death of a father. And my father died when I was 6 years old, and I never dealt with it. Whatever you say, children don't deal with these things. They know how to lock that stuff away. And suddenly I had to unlock it. And so Lion King became a requiem for my father. And I got to take my princess to the premiere, and she got to meet Mr. Bean, which was the most important thing for her. So partly what I'm trying to say, as we sit here, as all of you guys work on projects, just remember the seconds of your life are ticking away, so spend them with passion. You know, I mean, Chris Nolan and I looked at each other when we finished the last of the 3 Batman movies, and we went, well, that's 3 movies, but 12 years of our lives have gone by. So spend it wisely. And by that I mean, be reckless.
I'm a big fan of your works, and I would like to ask you an advice.
Hang on, where are you? Where are you?
Here.
Oh, there, okay. Advice.
Advice, either for composers and for director size. What is the base of agreement when you need to start a film with your composer as artist view and the director view? I mean, you may have a director, he has his own views and say, oh, I would like you to create a soundtrack like this one, or John Williams styles, or whatever, and maybe you feel something different, especially you that spans from classical to electronic. I mean, so an advice for people also starting now. You now have a big name, so it's
easy.
It's more easy. But for someone start with a director, how as a composer for respect and have his own views. Some advice.
Okay, let's start off with the premise, which I think is the truth. Music is indefensible. So I write a piece of music and I play it to you. If it doesn't touch you or doesn't seem appropriate, there's no way I can say to it, I can explain to you why you should love it, right? Music and true love seem to be connected in that way. They're irrational. They either work or they don't. My conversations with directors, and I think back, I'm emptying the RAM, you know, to remember all the directors. It never has been about the specificity about music. It's never been about a nice C major chord would be cool here. It's always been about story. We talk about story. We talk about story. We talk about food. We talk about wine. Those are the things, because a good director knows that my job is not to do what he thinks, but the thing that he can't imagine. Does that make sense? So my job is, you know, as I'm listening to this director describe what he's trying to do, and the relationship has to be such that it has to be incredibly personal and intimate, whereby he tells me his secrets, the secret ambitions of the film that he can never voice in front of the executives. Like for instance, that the Joker in Batman, the big summer movie, is just going to be one very quiet note. Can you imagine what a freak out that can create? It's just, you know, and that's going to cost $200 million. So these secrets of what we are trying to say with the film are very important to have that relationship. And then you have to have a point of view. And every film, and I really have gone through this in my head, every film I've ever worked on, by the time I start writing, I know what my point of view is, except for one with Mireille, but that's a different story. Oh, I can tell you a story in a second. But I have an intellectual framework of what I want to say, which is different from what the actors are saying on the stage. The other part that is vital to me is I know how the film looks. I need to know the colors, I need to I need to know who the DP is, how he's going to shoot it, because the colors on the screen and the colors in the music have to complement each other. You know, I think it's very important that we create a unified piece of work. But ultimately, my intellectual framework has never, you know, the idea for each movie has never changed. But that doesn't mean I can just write it. Sometimes I write something 30 times. It's because I'm not good enough to execute the idea, you know, the ambition of the idea. And actually the only time it went wrong was on Spirit, which was a movie I did with Mireille, and I thought, it's a Western, great, guitars. And the movie takes place in an America before people got there. And when I heard the guitars play the first note, I knew it was such a mistake because it was the most human sound you could possibly hear. And so I then said, it should be an avant-garde electronica score, and I did that for 6 months before realizing it was really boring. And no, it took me a long time to find the voice for that one. You know, and I had a lot of help from everybody else. But usually it's, and it doesn't matter if you're me or if you're another composer. You have a voice, you have a point of view, you have an idea. Do your idea. Don't be afraid of the idea. But stay vulnerable enough to be heartbroken when the idea goes wrong, but at the same time remember the one thing, which is music, you play music, right? In every language, I think, music is played. And so, when people ask me, when did you start playing music, I can't remember. It was always there. I just never had to grow up. So I try to have this attitude that if a piece of music doesn't work and we have to do it again, it's okay. It's just they're inviting me to play more, to do more music. It's great. Isn't that what I wanted to do all my life? Write music and play with other musicians. And for all of those of you who are not musicians, let me just say, just from my point of view, living a playful life is not such a bad idea. Don't take it all so bloody seriously. It's, you know, have a bit of a laugh at it. Especially at the grimmest moments of writing code at 3 o'clock in the morning. Hello.
What you said about Doris, the fictitious character that you... okay. That is it. Why I hear myself double this one. Okay.
It's life. It's,
Okay. That is the exact reason why I got into composition. So, I was wondering, what would your advice be for a young composer to get out there and to be heard?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Oh, you think so?
I can't do anything else. I'm unemployable. I got thrown out of 9 schools. All I ever did was dream about playing music. I didn't ask for this career. This career happened to me because I was surrounded by people who were helpful, who were mentors, who taught me, who are teaching me every day. When I was a child, everybody said, you know, you should go to university, you should study law, or you should become a doctor, or you should do any of those things. And now it suddenly turns out that if you want to be a good lawyer, you should be really good at the internet, because all the really good answers are right there, you know. And the one thing that seems to become more relevant these days is poets and musicians and stuff like that. All the stuff, you know, nobody knows where the world is going anymore. So all that good advice about study hard and become an astrophysicist, suddenly that didn't quite work out in my case. And now I get to hang out with astrophysicists who ask me about the shape of the universe in musical terms. That absolutely does not answer your question. How do you get there? Don't take no for an answer. I mean, everybody is going to say no to you. And the only thing you can do is write something that moves somebody somewhere who will then take you as and mentor you and treat you with dignity and respect and give you a chance, you know? I mean, this room is full of people who were given a chance, and is full of people who are able to give people a chance, you know? And so, to recognize talent, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, part of what I've tried to do is that I try to give other people a chance. Out of it's not some great altruistic reason. It's just I find it really interesting to hear new people's music, to hear new music, you know. And you know, I know how my stuff sounds, you know. So it's a great big world, and it needs more music. So just see that as your opportunity. Just don't take no for an answer. I start working before the film is made, but the actual scoring process is always at the very last moment, because I'm an infamous procrastinator, and I like to have as much time as possible, and I drive people like Mireille completely insane, because it's like, Spirit, do you remember that movie, that scene where like there was a vital scene that I literally wrote on the stage in front of the musicians, because, you know, it's like, look, writing music and cooking is sort of the same thing. to be a half-decent cook, you need to know what's fresh, you know, the carrots are fresh, the potatoes are, you know, and you spend an inordinate amount of time peeling potatoes and chopping onions and doing all that stuff, and the guests are coming at 8 o'clock, and at 10 to 8 you throw all those ingredients into a pot, and you hope that you're going to have a delicious meal for the for the guests. But you try to have all these fresh ingredients, but were it not for the last second, nothing would ever get completed. I can now talk about Stephen, but really what I want to talk about is part of what it means being a musician is that, or coming from a band, or if you're in an orchestra, or any of that stuff, is this thing of playing together. And the thing that most people don't realize about musicians is they all think we learn how to play really well. That's not so important. What's really important is we learn how to listen to each other really well. Because to make something sound good, you have to support the other musician, which means you have to listen to them so you can play the right thing to make them shine. And I think that goes for filmmaking as well. So these movies were all incredible collaborations between the animators, the directors, the producers, the musicians, everybody, you know, and I think the thing I did the most was just listen, you know, listen, and even we have an expression in German which is so great, and I just wish it would translate into English. It's called das Auge hört mit. The eye is a co-listener. We listen with our eyes. And so when I see, you know, when I see a pencil sketch, when I see just a quick, you know, and I get everything. I know how the music should sound from a quick, you know, just from a quick drawing. You know, I mean, that's why I always loved working with Ridley Scott, because we would go out for dinner and I say to him, tell me the story, and within 5 minutes the pen is out and the movie is taking place in front of me on a tablecloth, you know, and the music is forming in my head, because there are many ways to listen, but listening to everybody, and everybody is part of that music. You want everybody's DNA in that music. This isn't just, none of these scores are just my scores. They are the scores of everybody who inspired and worked on that movie. You know, I am just their musical messenger.
Hans, we have a very last question for a young fan of you. Come here. The question is in Italian.
Qual è stata la tua emozione quando hai iniziato a produrre delle colonne sonore nella tua vita?
Say the beginning of that. I missed the beginning. Tara? No, it was. You know, when I started doing movies, the first soundtrack, it's always the same thing. Since she is my victim today. When Lorraine phones me up, she goes, hey, let's make a movie about. I go, wow, that sounds great. And I get really excited. And then I sit down in the studio and there's a blank page in front of me, and it's white, and the white burns my eyeballs, and I sit there for days and days and days in sheer terror. Actually, Murray witnessed me once losing my marbles completely for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. He thought I was crazy, and somehow we survived. It was on Madagascar. It was a very simple question: what is the music of New York? And everybody, of course, goes, well, of course, it's Gershwin. No, that's Woody Allen's New York. Oh, it's jazz. Well, jazz is the death of any commercial success in a movie. So we had to invent something new, and we came up with this very, very simple thing. It's incredibly simple. It's like nothing, but you witnessed the struggle. You were calling the heart surgeons, right, and the brain surgeons. I mean, I was not well. So I'm not saying, you know, I'm flippant about it here, but I take it really, really seriously, because I take it really seriously that I am part of a whole, and I have these brothers and sisters who are working their asses off, and I better pay some respect, not just to Doris, but to my, you know, come up with the goods. And it's not so easy sometimes. Never, actually.